Hello, welcome back to Up the Villa opposition preview, Villa v City. I'm joined by the tactical goat on Man City side of things, Nobbins. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm not a tactical goat by any means, but yes, I can definitely talk about City and why we are rubbish this season. I'm sure all Villa fans will be very happy to hear that we've been a bit pants this season. Yeah, I'm doing very well. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, as a Villa fan and having played against Man City, you have done some serious damage to us over the years. So how are you feeling as a fan in general at the minute?
Not good, to be honest. Yeah, it's Pep's worst ever period in terms of like the number of losses and the results. It's I imagine it's the worst for all of these players in terms of that as well. And it's just like been a domino effect this season in terms of like one bad thing leads to another bad thing and it all compounds and it leads to this situation where City basically it's December and I think everyone thinks City are out of the title race. So a lot of work needs to be done for sure from a City perspective.
Yeah, and from afar as a Villa fan, it feels like there's a lot of things that are sort of happening, which are sort of meaning that you're sort of in this position. Like, the big one is Rodri's injury, but you go back to the start of the season with like Oscar Bob getting injured at the start, and I felt like he was going to be a player that featured quite a bit this season, so that was a massive blow. The form's pretty bad, but one thing that I've noticed is the mentality at times. Like you go, it's 1-1 at the weekend, and then that shouldn't normally happen to like a Man City, but it does. And you've seen it a couple of times this season. So what's going on, like mentality? Why do you not look like the Man City that we all recognize, sort of, that are just able to sort of find a way or just be so like resolute?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I think that lots of issues have happened with City this season. I think there have been tactical issues this season. There have been physicality and athletic issues this season. And that has all built up to the losses, which then leads to, as you quite rightly point out, the mentality issues. I think that obviously what happened at the derby was outrageous, but it's happened. The fact that's not the first time it's happened this season is even worse. Feyenoord, we were 3-0 up in around the 70th minute, and the game ends 3-all. That should obviously never happen. And that's at the Etihad as well, regardless of like what team you are. And yeah, when you normally consider, I mean, obviously, this, sorry to bring this up, but as a Villa fan, you were 2-0 up against us a few years ago and mentality monster City within like 5-10 minutes make it 3-2. That's what you normally associate with City. But yeah, I think that the results have just got to a lot of these players, to be honest. Pep's come out saying, I don't know how to solve this. And we're seeing a fragility with a lot of these guys, even like our leaders who normally associate with being so resolute. I think it just goes to show that any player who goes through this level of form is eventually going to suffer from a mental perspective. And yeah, right now we are frail physically, we are frail emotionally, we are frail mentally. It's probably the best time to play City.
Villa do tend to give some gifts out from time, and we are always that team that if you're on a bad run, play Villa and you'll win. That's generally how it goes from our point of view. Then, so let's touch on Rodri. Then, like we all know, huge player for you, and we saw it sort of last year when we beat you at Villa Park. That no Rodri, we were able to try and exploit you, and we played the best I think I've ever seen Villa play, to be honest. So did you expect this level of drop off, or did you just feel like you'd be able to like manage without Rodri? Like, is it a bit of a shock that you've done this badly without him?
Yeah, it definitely. I knew we were going to struggle, but I felt that we could have survived until like January window opens, and then we hit the market there. I don't think anyone envisaged this level of capitulation for sure. And it is, in fairness, it does go beyond just Rodri being injured. I actually think that a lot of these issues we had were also present last season as well. The differences were we had players who could bail us out. So, for example, I mean, to put it in perspective, two City players, Rodri literally won the Ballon d'Or, and that saved our season. Foden won Player of the Year and like broke ridiculous records in terms of goal scoring. That's what was required for us to win the title last season. So it does go beyond the Rodri injury, and I do blame City in respect to squad building for allowing it to get to this stage, not properly replacing Gundogan. To be honest, after the treble year, but yeah, I don't think anyone would have predicted this level of fall off. Of course, you're going to be impacted if your most important player is out for the whole season, but this drop off, in my view, is not acceptable from like a squad building perspective.
Yeah, you talk about squad building, and I do watch a lot of Man City content creators, and a lot of them are mentioning sort of like the recruitment has not been the best. So what are your sort of thoughts on that? You know, you brought Gundogan back, but I imagine you didn't bring him back to sort of play him every week. He was probably going to be like off the bench every now and again. So has it been a big issue, and sort of how big is this rebuild now going to have to be? Because Pep signed his new deal, so you can touch on Pep as well. But you know, what's got to happen, sort of like Jan, summer, to get you back, sort of where you feel like you should be?
A lot, to be honest. Like I did a video recently where I was like outwardly thinking, look at that City side that played United in the derby. How many of those do you look at and go, yeah, you're a nailed on starter in a title winning campaign? And I looked down, I was very honest with myself, and I thought 5 or 6, maybe. So around half, half the players, which obviously isn't good enough. There are lots of players who are very early in their career, like a Savio, a Doku, who could be great players, but aren't nailed on starters or nailed on league winners yet. And then there's players who are approaching the end of their careers, Gundogan, Kyle Walker, even players like, Bernardo Silva, maybe even Jack Grealish from a City perspective. Lots of these players are sort of towards the tail end of their career. And we do have a very old squad in that sense. So the squad building's been poor, in all honesty. And there's a reason why our higher ups, it's been revealed after the treble year. They said, the window after that was a bit of a nightmare for us in terms of like trying to rebuild the squad. So yeah, a lot of work needs to be done. At least 2 signings in January, from my perspective. We need like a midfielder who can mitigate Rodri's absence, but also operate alongside him going forwards. And we all know City's worst performing player needs to get upgraded. So in my view, minimum, we should be looking to get a right back and a solid midfielder in Jan. And then from the summer, I think you're looking at maybe moving on around 8 to 10 players. Maybe not all at once. It's a bit FIFA, career mode-ish. But there or thereabouts across the next couple of windows, I'm looking at 8 to 10 that need to be moved on, maybe bringing in around 8 across the next couple of windows for sure.
So Pep in his sort of pressers has been sort of like, feels like he's a bit stumped of like what's going on really. So what are you trying to do? Is it sort of like we've still got players inverting into midfield still? I know he's been trying Grealish as well. So I imagine like it's quite difficult to pinpoint what your sort of style is when you're not playing this well. So what's he trying to do to sort of get you out of this bad run?
Yeah, so Pep's tried a number of formations this season. The main one, the one he started the season with, is the 3-1-6. That's been his pet project, it seems, this season. Now the issue with that system is the emphasis on that one in midfield. You're putting a lot of pressure on that one midfielder with the ball to do a lot of like defensive cover and also just dictating play from deep. Even Rodri, I think, would struggle at doing that. I think like the best sort of player to deal with that would be someone like a Fernandinho from like 2018, or like a Makaleli from like the mid noughties, that sort of player who can cover all that distance. So it would be very tricky for us to play like this, even with Rodri in the team. But we're doing it without Rodri in the team. So that's made it even more challenging from a City perspective. Pep's tried to compensate for that by throwing in a lot of his midfielders who you'd normally associate as, the control-based midfielders, for example, like the likes of Rico Lewis and Kovacic, Gundogan, etc. The idea being that I'm going to play a lot of my control players and not lose control, but it's having the opposite effect. I think the best example was at St. James's Park against Newcastle, where we had Kova, Gundo, Lewis, but we kept losing the ball. So it's actually having the opposite effect. As you say, he's tried experimenting with Grealish in the middle. It worked against Forest, but Forest played into our hands. It works less so against Crystal Palace, I think it was. And he's not even attempted to play Mateus Nunes in the centre. So there's a reason why Pep said, I don't know what the solution is. And Pep's getting a lot of criticism, and I think he has made errors this season, but I think fundamentally there isn't an in-house solution, really. Maybe he could be relying on youth players a bit more. Like we do want to see our academy players giving them more of a go. But fundamentally, I think outside of signing players, there is no solution, to be honest with you.
So one of the main questions I've got for you is something that a lot of Villa fans and a lot of observation that they will have of Jack Grealish. So I kind of understand how he's been playing for you over the years with a lot of control, keeping the ball, recycling possession. I kind of get that because you did it in the Champions League quite a lot, and it won you a European Cups. But what a lot of football fans and Villa fans kind of like struggle with is, why is Doku sort of allowed to like attack, but Grealish isn't? Why is that?
See, I don't know if it's a case of Grealish isn't allowed to attack. I think that, and by the way, Grealish is my favorite player at City. I just make that clear. I'm a big fan of Jack. I will always stick up for him. I'll say, well, he helped win us the treble, so I'm going to always stick up for Jack. But a big criticism of him from me, I mean, there's a ridiculous stat. I don't think he scored this calendar year, for example, for City. He scored for England, but not for City. We're coming up to like literally a whole year before he scored a goal. I think he's not direct enough and he's not aggressive enough. I don't actually think it's Pep saying you must not take on your man, because we signed Doku, who is notoriously I think in terms of the stats anyway, I think he's the best 1v1 dribbler in Europe. And we also signed Savio, who is again a fantastic take on player. So I don't think it's a case of Pep says to Jack, you must not take on players. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if there's like just a fundamental confidence issue that he's never really got to grips with outside of the treble winning year. Last season, he had a lot of injuries, for example, and then sometimes he was on this inside, sometimes he wasn't. So I wonder if there's a case of he doesn't want to take those risks because he will be concerned what Pep thinks about him. But Doku does that, and he keeps playing, and Savio does that, and he keeps playing. So I would like to see Jack take more risks and be more aggressive and be more assertive, because he's such a wonderful player. But as I say, I wonder if he's just got it in his own mindset of, oh God, I don't want to get in trouble and do something and maybe lose the ball here. But going to my point earlier about, playing lots of control-based plays makes it worse. There's that infamous clip that now that Henry's assessing, where it's the lead up to the first goal, and it starts with Jack Grealish at the corner, and he could go forwards, but he goes backwards. And I think there's something in his head now, but it's actually having the opposite of the desired effect. The desire for supreme control is actually having the opposite impact.
Is he one of the players that you think should stay?
I really like Jack. So from a sentimental perspective, I would like him to stay, but I'm also realistic. And I think that at this stage in his career now, given the fact that we have like all these really exciting wingers coming through, given the fact that even with that, I know he's not played much in the centre for City, but for example, against Palace, he wasn't quite there. He didn't quite understand the role. And given like all the depth of like midfield talent that City have generally, if everyone is fit, like likes of Foden, Rodri, Kevin De Bruyne, obviously, I do struggle to see what is the long-term future for him. To be honest, I think he's got 2 years left on his contract. I'd be surprised if City let him go on a free or let him run down to only having 1 year. So it wouldn't surprise me if he leaves in the summer. That pains me to say, because again, big fan of Jack, but I imagine he's on a lot of wages. And if he's not contributing enough, like in terms of direct output, then he's probably going to have to make way.
Yeah, one of the players that played for you and more so your academy was Morgan Rogers. So what have you made of Rogers this season or this year at Aston Villa? Because, at the start of the year in January, he was playing for Middlesbrough, and he sort of ended the year playing Champions League football. So his journey this year has been absolutely remarkable. So have you been able to catch much of him?
Yeah, well, it's quite funny because he's probably one of the players that we need right now in our team, like in terms of just like a physicality and athletic perspective and ball carrying. Like Rodgers is probably the sort of player that City could really use in their midfield. Likewise, if like players like Lavia, for example, who we also let go. So yeah, I'm really I'm not one of these City fans who wants all their past players or past academy players to do rubbish. I'm really happy for him. Obviously, happy that he's thriving. It's a credit to City's academy as well. But yeah, I've been very impressed with him, and there's a reason why lots of our fans have been going, "Oh, can we get Rodgers back into our team right now?" Because he has been performing well, and again, he's the sort of profile that we need right now. I think that's the more important point to Rodgers. Yeah.
And touching on Villa, then what have you made of Villa this season?
You're a weird team, aren't you? So it's coming from like City this season. Yeah, hot. It's hot and cold, isn't it? With Villa, I really thought that you were gonna crack on this year. And again, I like Villa. I was happy that you got back into like the European football and like fighting for top 4 spots. I think that's really really fun and interesting. It's good to have different teams doing that. But yeah, you just can't seem to get that level of consistency. Like you went through that really weird run, like we just couldn't seem to win a game or put in a good performance for a long period of time. I'm not sure why that's the case, but I just know for an absolute fact that this weekend, given the fact that you got the likes of McGinn, Rodgers, Tillemans, etc., your midfield is going to absolutely bully us. So even though you've not necessarily been performing that well this season, or maybe relative to like last season in particular, I still fully expect your midfield to absolutely batter ours, to be honest.
Well, I did a little tactical episode, and I said I want to see Onana, Kamara in the middle, and I just want to see us being like really aggressive and intense. And
that's a player, by the way, Onana. I was really interested about him coming into City. I think he would have been perfect. So the fact that Villa got him has really upset me. And yeah, that's another name who's just going to absolutely tear apart the entirety of our midfield. Yeah, I'm just picturing like him against Gundogan now, just like in an athletic battle. It's just going to be embarrassing, to be honest.
So touching on the game, then, how are you feeling, sort of going into it? Like, are you? I mean, you support Man City. You must be pretty like confident that the form's gonna pick up and there's gonna be a victory, and you're gonna sort of go on a bit of a run, because it can't keep carrying on, can it?
Well, you say that, but for like the past 5 weeks, I've been like saying to like my viewers, right, guys, surely it's not going to get worse than this. And then a new low happens. It's like, surely it's not going to get worse than this. And then it goes lower and lower and lower and lower. And I thought that the 4-0 against Spurs was going to be the lowest point, but the capitulation to United's got to be the lowest point now. So it's all well and good saying, well, surely you'll turn it around. But again, outside of like bringing in other players, I don't see how City can possibly turn it around. And you mentioned it earlier at the top of the show. The match last season at Villa Park, that was the best anyone's played against Pep's City ever, I think, up until even including this season, because you absolutely dominated us. And you could talk about City's lineup that day. We didn't really play a midfield, but that was like one of the most dominant displays I've ever seen. So I'm still scarred by that, to be honest. So it would not be surprised with that midfield you just mentioned as well, if there's a similar thing. I just don't see how we can begin to get a grip of the game, especially if like Villa are as intense as they were, or even close to being as intense as they were last season. Like John McGinn, for example, I thought he was man of the match last season at Villa Park. So if he plays like even like half to his level, I expect it to be a long day for City. I just can't see us having any true control of the match.
Do you think Grealish will start?
That's a good question. I think he will. Yes, I think that. No, actually, no, he won't. I don't think he will. No, I think that we'll play a similar front five to what we played against United, a very attacking front five, which was Doku, Foden, Haaland, De Bruyne, and Bernardo Silva. I don't think there's room for Grealish, actually. I'll change my mind.
Yeah, because he played at the Etihad against us, and I think he dive. I think he died. He won a penalty, didn't he? I think so. So I don't.
All I remember is
played at Villa.
I think I remember him playing quite well, because I remember bigging up his performance. I don't know if he dived though. I can't remember that, but he definitely played well. That's what my mind is telling me in terms of my memory.
Yeah, I think at your place last year it was when Duran scored. And it sort of like started Duran off. So yeah, your keeper's probably gonna have to stay on his line, because Duran likes to have a little shot from anywhere. So Yeah, so right, it's been great chatting to you and getting the insight on Man City. I'll tag your channel in the title and the description as well. So cheers for coming on, mate.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Pleasure.